Fabulous. Welcome, everybody. I'm Steph. I'm the director of Bamba, and it's really good to be back here at the beginning of this wonderful new year of 2025 and to bring some energy to this space and welcome you all to this session that is being led by the one and only Karen Atkinson from Mindfulness UK. I'll hand over to in just a second. But before we do that, I'm going to do a short intro and then hand over to Karen, who's going to take us through a short practice to settle us into the session and then move us through the presentation and Q&A. Hope that sounds okay to everyone. But let me introduce Karen first. So yeah, Karen Atkinson, give us a wave, Karen, so everybody knows where you are on the screen. Wonderful, thank you. Karen's the CEO of Mindfulness UK. And I have to say, I feel very privileged that Karen and I worked together for a while, and I worked under her direction at Mindfulness UK a few years back. But Karen's also an honorary lecturer at Queen's University in Belfast and an author of the Compassionate Mindful Inquiry in Therapeutic Practice. You may have seen that book was published a few years back, and I'm sure that Karen will talk to that later on. With the Compassionate Mindful Resilience Programme workbook, which is being published in 2025, so look out for that too. Now, Karen and her team specialise in training others to build resilience through mindfulness and compassion, gratitude and joy. And she has an extensive background of more than 25 years in delivering trauma-informed, shorter practices in a really effective way, tools and skills to patients and clients across various sectors. And I have to say, very broad in terms of those various sectors too. And I know that Karen will touch on that later. Karen's one of the directors of our own Bamba affiliate organisations, and a few years back was actually the chair of Bamba. So it's actually really wonderful to have you sharing this space, Karen, today, but holding this space for us. So without any further delay, I'll hand over to you. Thank you so, so much.
Oh, thank you, Steph. It's lovely to be here and so wonderful to see familiar faces and those that are new to me too. So yeah, as Steph said, let's start off with a practice, and I'm going to guide you through a practice that's on the Compassionate Mindful Resilience program called a heart practice. And so yeah, it's going to be about 5 minutes or so. So finding that comfortable, dignified posture, making sure that there's a sense of connection with the earth in whichever way that suits you. So it might be through the feet, if that's possible, through the support of the chair. It's having a sense of arriving, letting go of all the external stimulation of getting here and settling in and starting to tune in internally a little bit more, noticing what that feels like. And allowing, if you're able to, for the awareness to come from the heart and not the head. So if you're still feeling quite heady, allow yourself some time to slowly and gently drop down towards and into the heart space. Sensing into that transition. Perhaps to the heart center, which is situated equally between the left and the right, the front and the back, in the chest. Not exactly where the heart is, but it's about the size of a tennis ball. And as you attune to the heart center, sensing into what's here for you emotionally right now. It might be noticing your feeling tone. Just having a sense of that inner atmosphere in this moment. We're not trying to generate anything or make anything happen. We're simply observing what's here right now. And knowing that whatever's here right now is enough. What we have in this moment is enough. This moment being so precious. And notice as perhaps that sense of enoughness lands for you in your heart, what that feels like. Having an awareness of the effect of that sense of being enough, having enough. And perhaps if it feels comfortable, having a sense of being good enough. Aware of how that feels as a ripple effect in the body and mind as we stay centered on the heart. And perhaps if you feel you would like to, allowing your hand to come to that place of support and nurture. That's one hand or both hands on the heart space, or perhaps a little lower down. Sometimes I like to place my hand on the solar plexus, that area just below the chest or the belly, or perhaps just holding yourself in some way to support yourself. Reassuring. Really taking care of yourself in this moment, just as you are. And alongside that, bringing a feeling and attitude of trust, trusting in this process of being here, sitting with the emotion, the feeling tone, bringing about that sense of reassurance of this is enough. And feeling into the experience of trust, bringing that element, that attitude. And knowing too this practice of attuning to the body, heart and mind, and ultimately develop and lead to transformation. And it's certainly something I've experienced in my life, and just sensing into perhaps how your life has changed through this practice of mindfulness and kindness. And how that feels in the heart. And the S of this acronym HEARTS is to sustain this practice. So it's a short practice, but to do it whenever you feel you need to tune in, to sense into what's here for you in your heart. And being with this experience for a few moments more. And perhaps allowing your hands, if they've been on the body anywhere, just to come gently and softly back down to the lap. And in this pause, perhaps noticing any physical sensations, any changes in the body, any shift in your thoughts. And easing yourself from the practice when you're ready in your own time, just slowly and gently. It might be that you like to just bring your chin down to your chest and slowly open your eyes if they've been closed. Perhaps have a roll of the shoulders, a stretch. Lovely, thank you. Oh, so I'm going to resist the temptation to do an inquiry. Obviously, I've written a book about inquiries, so it's quite a thing for me to not open up. But maybe later on we could do some of that. So what I'd like to do is to go through a PowerPoint. There's quite a lot to say about the development of the Compassionate Mindful Resilience Programme and the work we've been doing in workplaces and how we've been delivering in lots of different ways in lots of different sectors. So yeah, if you just sort of bear with me as I go through it, and then perhaps leave the questions towards the end, unless you have a burning question, and I'm really happy to answer that. I'm not very good at delivering on a PowerPoint and also responding to a chat at the same time. So perhaps Steph or Sally could keep an eye on chat and could support me in that. That would be absolutely marvellous. Thank you. Okay, so this is what we're doing, Compassionate Mindful Resilience for the workplace. And I just felt like it might be useful to say a little bit about my background, to give you some context as to how I've developed this programme. So I have a BSc Honours in Nursing Studies, and I did that back in the 80s, which rather dates me, I know. But it was the second cohort ever in the UK that did this type of degree. So we were guinea pigs to a point, but it was a 4-year degree course alongside doing the RGN, General Nurse Training at St Thomas's Hospital and South Bank Uni. And in it, we did a lot of sociology and psychology, as well as anatomy and physiology and so on. So it's a very robust degree, and I'm still connected to most people that did that degree. And we really recognised how influential it was for us and how we go back to the content very regularly. I then, having worked at St Thomas's for quite some years, I then went into the district, became a district nurse in London. And then when I moved down to the southwest several years later, I started working with a psychology team. So as a consultant psychologist and a few other psychologists and a pain consultant. And we were working, obviously, I was on the pain team with patients with really complex pain presentations, and with the psychologists with patients who suffered from trauma, abuse, torture. So I started that work several years ago, and when I count it, it must be about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And I did that work for about 6.5 years. And although my role, my title was physical therapist, the main things that I did were teaching patients mindfulness and compassion. We did it under the umbrella of desensitization programs and rehabilitation and that sort of thing. But I had my own clinic space, and because I was a yoga teacher and had started my own meditation journey in my early 20s, to support me with my difficulties in my upbringing, I was able to transfer what I was experiencing through my meditation, utilizing the psychological work that I'd learned on my degree, and obviously with the consultants and the psychologists I was working with, and yeah, really supported patients to teach them short practices of both mindfulness and compassion and gratitude. And I really distinctly remember being in the staff room one day, and a psychologist came to me and said, "I think you'd be really interested in reading this book, Karen." And she handed me The Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's somebody else doing this work out there. I had felt a bit on my own, to be honest, doing this in the clinical world. And it opened a whole new doorway to me. So yeah, went on to do more training, and then I founded Mindfulness UK in 2010, wanting to go from the clinical work that I was doing, which was very much one-to-one, 5 or 6 patients a day, 5 days a week for 6.5 years. It takes its toll working with people with trauma and abuse and hearing all of that day in, day out, and the slow changes that happen for people as they start to rehabilitate. So yeah, started in 2010, having taken a deep breath. I remortgaged my house and I bought a property in Taunton and set up a mindfulness centre. So I really meant business. And it was at a time where mindfulness, some of you won't remember it at all, but when mindfulness was coming from the clinical world a little bit more into mainstream. And my goodness me, what a change has happened over the last 15 years, thankfully. And I was, as Steph said, I think it was 2013-14, I was chair of BAMBA and became an honorary lecturer of Queen's Uni a couple of years ago, because of the research that we've been doing together. I'm also an author, as Steph said, and we have also just launched a reflective e-journal for the Compassionate Mindful Resilience programme for people who are doing that. And I just wanted to show you a picture of some of my team. So we were out for afternoon tea. So yeah, these are some, but I have many more people in the team. These are just the local people to the southwest. So it was lovely. We've just done the hearts practice, which just to support you in understanding what we've done. It was taking attention to the heart, feeling that sense of being enough just as we are, bringing the awareness of how that feels to our thoughts and feelings, our body, to reassure ourselves with a hand on the heart or somewhere else, and to trust that process and feel the sense of transformation and how we can sustain practice over time and how that really loops back into our transformation. So here we are with 3 objectives, and I'm sure you read about them, but this is what I'm going to cover today, is to understand the relationship between mindfulness and compassion by exploring the Iceberg Model of Inquiry within workplace settings, appreciate how this approach can develop and enhance workplace resilience in a sustainable way, and to gain more knowledge of the research findings from teaching shorter practices and how these contribute to a shift in workplace health and resilience. So yeah, hopefully that's what you think you're here for. And from my background, you can hear that I've been working with in a trauma-informed way for a very long time. And the creation of a safe space is just so important. I know trauma-informed mindfulness seems like it's a bit of a buzzy word, but we've been doing it for a long time, those in the clinical settings. So it's interesting for me to see, and really important that it's come to the fore for mindfulness teachers who are not clinically trained. So yeah, taking a look at how mindfulness and compassion enhance emotional resilience, intelligence, sorry, and builds resilience. So this is a little piece, and you're going to get the PowerPoint. So if you feel like I'm skipping along some things a little quickly, you can have a look in more detail at what I'm talking about. But I just thought that it might be useful to have an overview of what the CMR program is. So just to pick out a few words, it's experiential and practical in nature. And the reason I developed it was because I felt that there was such an opportunity in society to bring a shorter course with shorter practices, because that was my previous job. And I had been doing it also through another training program that I wrote, which was the Integrating Mindfulness and Compassion in Professional Practice, which is a level 4 qualification. And we've been training people for many years. And just the power of shorter practices, which I'm sure you know, but knowing that there wasn't a great deal of research around it in any way that could feed into a bigger picture. So I really felt that there was an imperative to get this recognised, and the AI shift was really contributed to me wanting to do this, because of the feelings of being more separate, perhaps through doing computer work post-pandemic and so on. Yeah, so I wanted to help and support people to reconnect with themselves and with others. So why did I do it? Well, I've been teaching and teacher training the MBSR, certainly through Mindfulness UK, since 2010. And post MBSR, I did recognise that there was a need for more emphasis on compassion and core values and emotional intelligence. So I actually did develop a 4-week course many moons ago. Um, and I've had been delivering that for several years, and just internally, really. So people did the MBSR course with us, and then they might have chosen to go on to do a subsequent shorter course. So in 2020, when my book was published, actually, and the pandemic started to rear its head, I thought, because I'm from health and social care background, people in that area, those sectors, are going to really need some resilience through mindfulness and compassion. So I sort of took some elements of that other course I was doing and created this CMR course with EDI at its core, so it's accessible, engaging. It shows demonstrable changes, which we'll look at in a moment, and a democratizer. So many people that we'd been working with were taking some elements of various trainings into places that longer courses couldn't reach. So working with the homeless, working with refugees, working with women's hostels and that sort of thing. So I wanted to create this course that was more accessible and supported people perhaps that weren't necessarily able to do longer courses. So it's 8 modules over 4 weeks with 2 hours at a time, with 10 seconds minimum as a practice and 10 minutes maximum for time poor workers. And I've said that it's focused on building resilience. And the efficacy so it's been researched over the last 5 years and is also accredited by the CPD Standards Office for 8 credit points, which is very appealing to workplaces and aligns with my Iceberg model. So we look at the 2 wings of the bird, mindfulness and compassion. And this is a picture of my book. So there's a link to it if you haven't yet read it. And I just wanted to show the Iceberg model and how this applies to the workplace. So we start by becoming more mindfully aware, and we do that by paying attention. So we're coming out of autopilot, tuning into what's happening in the body, heart, and mind and external environment. So within the workplace, we're attuning to ourselves, to the work that is at hand, and other people at work. So we just start to become more aware in the workplace, and we've certainly seen that happen. In my previous job, I used to write court reports and for people who'd been in really difficult situations. And the psychologists I used to work with used to say, how can you concentrate so well and not get distracted? And I think it's because of my mindfulness practice, my meditation practice over the years. it made a real difference. My neurons were ready for doing that kind of work, so it was really helpful. So as we move to reflective dialogue, noticing what happens as we pay attention, we're exploring beneath the superficial patterns, creating new resources and promoting resilience. So we're looking at communication styles and communication channels in the workplace. We do some work around that, looking at processes and maximizing people's strengths and the strengths within teams, and seeing that we can't all be good at everything, and how we can complement each other more fully, maybe at work, with new perspectives on working patterns, employees to teams to changing culture. So just by paying attention to patterns, it really can make a difference at work. And then that learning can be integrated, going more deeply and seeing things as they really are. So some workplaces we go into, and the patterns are set, the habits are there, and we say, hang on a minute, post-COVID, does that really work still for you? And so we can start to create these new habits and strategies, being proactive and looking at realistic solutions, so not something that's out of this world, and to embed healthier protocols and choices into the workplace. But that's not enough, as we know. So we bring in an attitude of self-compassion. So as change is happening, maybe, and we're bringing in these new patterns and strategies, how can we encourage employees to take care of themselves as we review policies and working conditions and reflect on what employees need to be attracted to the post and be sustained and stay within the organisation? So moment by moment, self-compassion is so important as we build more efficacy into workplaces. So these changing habits and behaviour can be a wobbly point, as they are in any mindfulness course. And so sometimes what helps to steady the ship a little bit is some metrics. So we do a lot of metrics, and this is where we work with universities. And we measure outcomes, so the befores and afters, and we write reports on that. We also work quite a lot with mentors and champions to support changes. And then, of course, that leads to sustainable change. So we become aware as new sustainable ways of living rise to the surface. So that's really going into workplace culture change from within, with ongoing support, train the trainer programs, maybe them joining the membership that we have, ongoing contact. So I do not work within an organisation where they just want an hour of mindfulness to tick the box. We want to work with people, organisations that want to change culture and stay connected to that. So it's a really important aspect. So I am going to skip through this a little because I think I've spoken to most of it. And I'm sure you know the benefits of mindfulness and compassion. I think the pacing is a really big aspect to it. Not rushing at it all at once, and really making sure within a workplace you have a plan, you have a strategy as to how to build. So we often start with a pilot, and then we grow as the metrics grow, and increase our reach beyond what we start with. So let's just have a look at the research evidence. For the Compassionate Mindful Resilience Programme, it's 5 years, been 5 years, and continues to be ongoing. In fact, I've just had a conversation with Queen's University, who are just about to start an RCT on the CMR, so which is brilliant news. They've just got funding for it, so that's wonderful. So yeah, it's forever evolving. So in August, September last year, we heard from the International Panel for the Acknowledgement of Mindfulness-Based Approaches, thank you very much, that this was the first ever short course with shorter practices to be recognised. And yeah, feeling really fabulous about that. So pleased. It felt like a culmination of a couple of decades of work, really. So yeah, thank you to Bamba and thank you to Iamba for supporting me in that, and also to the CPD points that we get from the Standards Office. So there are 8 modules, as I say, starting off with exploring mindfulness, then understanding compassion, introducing and then cultivating emotional intelligence, developing and then enhancing resilience, enabling our participants to feel resourced and connected. So some of the workplaces that we as an organisation have gone into are Public Health, England, NHS, Somerset County Council, Unison, foster care organisation, Kidney Care UK. We did a piece of research with them and Queen's Uni and had that published. Undergraduate midwives and nurses, banks. So we're just about to start a pilot in HSBC, a charity supporting adoptive parents. So that's us. But then the ripple, because we've trained over 100 teachers, the ripple is far and wide and in every sector you can imagine. So we have feedback from people who've done their training with us, and it's really lovely to hear where it's rippling out to. So when we go into organisations, we deliver in a lot of different ways. So we started off either in person or in a real venue, or just delivering online via Teams and Zoom. People then, or some organisations then wanted to have either an e-course as well as, or just do the e-course. So that's happened in 1 or 2 organisations. But generally speaking, we do a hybrid, so where we have some face-to-face, either online or in person, and they do an e-course so that they have something to dip into, but they also have us to do the inquiry and have discussions and go through all that questioning and exploration that we always do when we're on a course. And with the NAPC, which is the National Association of Primary Care, with whom we have a contract in North London, an ongoing contract at the moment, they asked us to pivot, which is why I said don't be afraid to pivot, because we'd done the in-person, we'd done the e-course, then we did the hybrid, and now we're doing a hybrid with the face-to-face online and a WhatsApp group. So I have transferred what was on the e-course to being micro teachings that are on WhatsApp. And we have a community WhatsApp group, which is quite different. It's like a business one, where we post every day or two either a practice or a piece of information or something else. So yeah, the metrics coming in on that. We've done 3 or 4 courses now. We've got several more to go, and it'll be fascinating to see the metrics with that. And yeah, of course, we're doing the research on that. So talking about scales and metrics, we do one before the programme begins. We do some at the end of the programme. We do have a midpoint catch up as well, but we don't do metrics around that. And then we have 3 months post-programme. We then create a report, and that's really useful for commissioning and getting funding. And the scales we use are dependent on organisations. So very clearly we'll be measuring mindfulness, compassion and resilience, but some organisations want to measure more around anxiety and depression or something specific. So we work with the organisation to see what they want. So yeah, we use depression scales and all sorts, and that's my clinical background as well, is really helpful in exploring what are the best metrics and scales to use. So as I say, this is the National Association of Primary Care, and their testimonials from I think this was the second course, but it might have been the first. I really recommend it. I'm not going to read it all, but I particularly wanted to pick out, would just like to say thank you for this opportunity. In work where I felt anxious, I've grounded myself with the exercises shared in the CMR and have helped me approach work in a better mindset and in a more resilient way. And then secondly, I've been able to regulate better my moods, bring myself back to the present, handle conflicts better, and create an emotionally safe environment in my relationships. And these people that we're teaching, they're often they're receptionists and administrators, as well as GPs and other allied health professionals, all within GP surgeries. And I always think of receptionists as being like the frontline workers of the front line. Imagine just standing there and having you not knowing what's going to come in the door at any moment in North London. So amazing. I think they're fabulous people and really hold them in high esteem. So yeah, these are just a few of the organisations: Queen's, Kidney Care UK, Newcastle University, who did a wonderful project with us with health and social care employees, undergraduate nurses I've mentioned, parents of children with heart disease, and we're looking at an RCT for patients with kidney disease and their carers. And again, this is a link to that published research and is one of the reasons why the CMR was recognised, I think, by the IPA, is the extent of this research. So I think I'll just skip over that. Through that research I've just mentioned, the CMR programme was found to be an acceptable intervention for people living with kidney disease, and they were end-stage kidney disease, so had really significant kidney disease, providing tools and techniques that support the mental health and well-being of this patient group. Further qualitative exploration into participant experience should be integrated within future trials of this intervention, which is what we're looking at doing with the RCT. So this is very quick because it shows that through Newcastle University, looking at employees in health and social care, the CMR increased mindfulness, it increased resilience, and it increased self-compassion. The self-compassion was the biggest increase. And what we found 3 months later was the self-compassion continued to increase. So the mindfulness and the sense of resilience stabilized at that higher level, but the self-compassion just grew and grew, which was fabulous. And I'm just going to draw your attention to this bottom right-hand corner where it says the impact of CMR. Without CMR, I wouldn't still be doing my nursing degree, which really sort of, yeah, fills my heart with joy, because obviously I did a nursing degree and I want to support people continuing in that line of work as best I can. So what next for us? There's more research with the RCT, integrating this more into the culture of organisations, expanding out from health and social care, as I say, going into banks, publishing the workbook. We've got a new reflective e-journal. We've got the CMR training pathway, which has shifted in 2025 in response to the IPA recognition. More democratization of mindfulness and compassion. This is very close to my heart. It's a really important aspect. Integrating the program into supervision training models, and rolling out more widely across GP surgeries and the NHS. So yeah, just very briefly, the Train the Trainer has these elements in it. You learn the course for yourself, you do it yourself. There's some self-directed training, so there's some pre-recordings, there's a live face-to-face training, some CPD. So it's very like the mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher training. It models itself on that. And then you deliver 2 courses with supervision, and that leads to certification, which means you can then become recognised as a BAMBA registered teacher. So yeah, if you are already registered with BAMBA or YAMBA, you can experience the CMR programme either for yourself, one-to-one, sorry, not one-to-one, but in a group, or the e-course. Complete the self-directed study online, complete the face-to-face training, attend the process of inquiry, and then continue to fulfil the BAMBA GPGs, such as retreats or whatever. So there's a real recognition of you already fulfilling the BAMBA GPGs, and then you submit your portfolio. So the ongoing support, as I say, we have a very strong community with a good membership, and yeah, it feels like a real whistle-stop tour, and it's time for questions and hopefully answers. So yeah, I'm really open to. I did see some things coming into chat. Did you see them, Steph? Do you want to?
We haven't had any questions in the chat yet. That's me.
Oh,
That's
okay.
me putting updates in. Maybe
Okay,
there's some live
perfect.
questions rather than people
Lovely.
popping them in there.
Okay, so
And
yeah, if you've,
yeah, just
mm, thanks, Steph. So
no
yeah,
worries. Yeah, maybe if there's anyone's got any questions around the research or some of the early work that Karen did in order to get to this point of creating the CMR, just wonder if there's anything coming up, the workplace piece in terms of how this correlates into the workplace, and particularly that part that Karen talked about around shorter practices, which is something that is emerging from the field and is
mm,
really, really important, I think, in terms of the desire for more people to get into more settings and teach, but actually there's a real ask, isn't there? There's a real demand for shorter practices. I'm wondering how that's landed with a few people on the session today.
mm. Yeah, yeah. So if you have any questions or comments, either physically put your hand up or
Yeah, we've got
maybe
one
you
from
can.
John. Great, John, go
Lovely.
for it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yeah, was curious to delve into what you were saying, Stephanie, about how it lands within the workplace,
Mm,
because one of the, I suppose, the challenges that I face on a regular basis is wanting to promote a whole variety of different ways of working that might be more compassionate, that might be more mindful. And I'll be able to cite examples of where we can show metrics related to attention, focus, self-compassion. But they say, okay, so how does that translate into the business bottom line?
Mm,
How does it translate into retention, sickness absence, and these
mm,
kind of metrics that we're really
mm,
focusing on? So I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that at all.
absolutely. It's hard to show those metrics. It is really, really hard. And you can't, I don't think that there is an absolute way of doing that, showing that correlation at all. But what you can show is the shift and change. And I think that doing both the metrics and the qualitative aligns and is so important. So the hours and hours of sort of post course that you spend talking to people and maybe recording that and getting um, some quotes and testimonials and things is important. But yeah, to show that if somebody's done the CMR course and then they're in the job 2 years later, that it's because of the CMR course, it's hard to align that. I would say I had a meeting with Unison last week, and we did a the CMR condensed over a weekend away at a beautiful place in Devon for 24 women last year, and one of those women had actually loved it so much that she thought Unison then were a great organisation, applied, and is now to a job there, and is now working in Unison, and it's extolling the virtues of mindfulness. And four other women say that it's the best training they ever went to in the whole time they've ever been Unison members, and has really helped them and supported them in their work. So there are tiny, tiny little pockets of where there's a direct relationship. But John, I think it's hard.
But that's really helpful, thank you. Because what I hear in that though
Mm,
is, particularly when it comes to sense of belonging,
mm,
being valued, developing a sense of trust and engagement, then that's what I'm hearing in what you're saying there. Because if you're asking someone sometime later, why they're doing what they're doing, and they're saying, well, it's actually in direct relation to this CMR
mhm,
course I did, or these practices that
mm,
I started to engage in, then you've
mm,
got something very valuable there. And I think that's something that HR departments would listen to if
mm,
if their particular focus is around, say, retention, or is around team harmony, or is
mm,
around reducing conflict, these kind of things. So
mm.
yeah, that's really helpful, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. We did a lot of work with social workers several years ago. Actually, was teaching the MBSR to start with, and then we worked towards and morphed into doing the CMR. And we've been invited to lots of conferences, and sometimes they were more conventions where prospective social workers were coming, and to hear that some different councils were actually providing this kind of training was a real attraction for some. So a recognition, as you say, that well-being is important, and that they're just not another sort of number on the team, helped them, because we wouldn't have been asked to go to those conferences and deliver our research findings if that weren't the case. So yeah, thanks, John.
Looking for hands going up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Lovely. Thank you.
That's just a simple question, Karen, really, around just engaging men on these courses. I mean, my experience is that there's far fewer male engagement on mindfulness courses, full stop. I'd be interested to know whether that's a general reflection. And I just wonder if you had any tips or any learning around how to make these courses attractive, I suppose, to both genders.
Our majority of work is in health and social care, so by default there are a lot more women in health and social care than men. It's interesting going into HSBC because there's a different demographic there, and so it has really shifted. So I think one has to sort of take a step back and look at what the organisation has, and the gender split. Yes, I agree that maybe the word, and I have had this conversation with others, that compassion is a big word and maybe more female focused, which obviously I completely disagree with. And I think it's becoming more and more understood within the workplace that being kind to ourselves and looking after ourselves and being compassionate really helps support mental health and well-being. So I have seen a massive shift in my work through Mindfulness UK from solely women to many of our teacher trainings being 50-50. From about 5 years ago, it went to about 50-50. I think we've shifted a little bit back in the direction because our focus is very much health and social care. But yeah, I mean, in fact, I can look around and see a couple of men who have done training with us, like Toby, for one. I don't know, I don't know, Toby, if you want to speak to that, that might be quite helpful.
Yeah, so you caught me off guard there. No, I guess I was thinking the same thing as Dean, actually. I did a 6-month compassion training with the Mindfulness Association, and the cohort was 18 strong and there were 2 men on it. And I said, is this like an anomaly? And they said, well, no, it's always the same. They get loads of men that are interested in mindfulness, that are sort of down with attention. And then as soon as the word compassion comes in, things sort of drop off a bit. So yeah, I guess I've been thinking about the sort of take up of, of how popular it would be with my sort of demographic, having compassion in the title of a course. So yeah, I'm just kind of more echoing kind of what Dean's saying than sort of bringing anything new to the table. But yeah.
I think it's really recognised, isn't it, as a difficulty, and maybe I'm not best placed to address it. So yeah, maybe there's something more that Dean and Toby and others can do.
What I have noticed though is in my MBSR, it seems to be the compassion that's the most transformative for a lot of the men that do my course, right? Like it really lands. But,
That's
they have to, it's almost like they have to work to, obviously work up to it,
Yes, absolutely, our experience too. And if you look at the research outcomes, that's what's being shown. It doesn't matter what your gender is, the compassion is the most transformative aspect of it, and that's what grows and grows. It's a really new skill for a lot of people. So thank you. Thanks, Dee and Toby. Connie, thank you.
Hi, Karen. Thank you very much for the presentation. You might have mentioned this on the in your in your PowerPoint.
Mm.
I'm kind of interested. I can't remember whether you said you did it with a refugee people as well, or so I'm kind of curious about the languaging in that delivery, and because I haven't experienced your program, so I was just wondering about, you know, the population, like maybe refugees or people who've just recently emigrated to the country, that this is a program that would be, you know, like accessible for them or not.
Languaging is just so important, and you know, the trauma-informed way that we teach is just paramount importance. And so we really consider, when we go into any area, you know, what can be used and what can't be used, what people have been through, and so on. Our organisation, Mindfulness UK itself, hasn't worked with refugees, but the people that we've trained have done. So I can, if that's an area of interest for you, I can put you in touch with those people, because and anybody who's worked in, who's interested in any sector, we've probably got a ripple. We've got about, I think, around 115 trained CMR teachers at the moment, and now with this new training program, hopefully, you know, we'll get more through because it's much more accessible. So yeah, happy to put you in touch, but I think the language has to be really trauma informed. You know, it's really so important. But thank you for bringing it, because we need to consider that wherever we're working.
Because I'm also particularly thinking about not just refugees or recent immigrants, but also I think people who might be like students that just come, you know, and study the country, and they kind of would, quite a lot of them would become homesick, and there might be like this kind of thing. It'd be their first time to actually not only struggling with the language, but also talking about emotion at the same time. So I was just really curious about that.
Yeah, no, I know that curiosity. I think it you know, this is the important point of this, is that there are lots of different training programs out there, and many of them, they're just training the skills, the tools, the techniques. But in order to be connected with that trauma informed and languaging to use, you have to do this yourself. You know, you have to have gone through the program to do this internal work, to be able to see the dark corners, and to feel the trembles in yourself when you're going through practices. And that's why for me the inquiry aspect is so important as well, is because we're continuously through inquiry checking in. You know, we're doing that weather check of what it's like, and if something's not landing well with a group, then you need to be very mature mindfulness teacher and think, hang on a minute, I need to change this, I need to do something about it. So inquiry, I know that's not what I'm here to talk about, but it's a really important aspect of our teaching, and to always be ready to flex and change, as is the initial assessment that you do. So we go back and back into that first contact that you have with people, and just be alert and alive to the changes and shifts that we need to make within the course presentation, or how long we spend. So just for instance, in the CMR, there's quite a lot on compassion fatigue and secondary trauma. Well, for some people, we're teaching that's not really that relevant. They're not experiencing secondary trauma. You know, people who work within the NHS definitely are, social workers most definitely are, but other people are not necessarily. So we would just adjust that piece within the compassionate mindful resilience. So yeah, flexing and changing and being responsive to need is a really, really important aspect of any teaching.
Thank you. Could I ask another question? That's so like you were talking about the, you know, understanding the people that are on the course. I guess this is more like about the course itself, I guess. Would you actually, for participants that do come on, like maybe not the one in the organization, but do you actually go through like an individual process of, you know, orientation, or actually is a group sort of thing? And then my other related, it's a completely different question, is on the Iceberg model. I was just wondering, in terms of a metaphor how do people generally receive it? Because I have actually been in a different setting where the iceberg model, actually that is sort of being received as something that it doesn't translate to safety at all. So it's kind of it's the imagery
Okay.
itself. So I just wonder whether that has ever happened to your
Yeah. Yeah, well, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. And I don't just say, here's the iceberg model, you know, it's always described. And in my book, there's a chapter by a neuroscientist who talks about the neurological components of the iceberg model as well, and how instills a sense of safety neurologically and so on. So it's always contextualized when it's being delivered. And yeah, in response to kind of your first observation, I think it's just, can you just say again exactly what it was that you were saying?
So maybe I contextualize like a little bit more, because I did a mindfulness program where we are looking for more people of color to, you know, come on the program, which they generally find mindfulness program and compassion program to be less accessible to them. So in those individual orientation, maybe we give them a phone call, then we get a bit more about, you know, those people, where they're coming from. And that, as we were delivering the course, we found that to be really helpful in terms of getting those people on board and sort of knowing what kind of maybe special flexibility and adjustment that we need to make. So yeah, I'm just curious how your program is being.
So we talk to the people that are interested and commission us. It might be HR, it might be, you know, a mindfulness lead or whatever, and find out what they want. In half an hour, I'm going on to a briefing webinar with the NAPC for the next cohort. So a briefing webinar is an orientation. So just orientating them to the course, and then they have a choice as to whether they come on the course or not, which again is a really important aspect of the course. So it's about choosing and making an informed choice. So either the organisation gives them the information through us, or people can come to orientation briefing, whatever they like to call it, and decide whether they're going to attend or not. Is that okay? Thanks, Connie.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, so much. So look, if there are any other questions or observations from today's session, as always, Sally would invite you to share that with us by email. As we said at the beginning, you'll absolutely get a copy of the pack that was used today, so you can look at some of the research and some of the statistics and the content and the detail of what Karen has talked through today with regards to the CMR and its correlation to the workplace, and some of the experiences that Karen and the team from Mindfulness UK have had in delivering the CMR within that pack. So you can look at that and take some time to pore over the detail, maybe for a bit longer. We're coming to time. Sally, is there anything extra that you want to add?
Only just to let people know that on the 27th of February, we're having a networking event. So when I send out the recording and the pack afterwards, hopefully early next week, I'll also be sharing that information as well. So it'd be great if we could have a few people there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Sally. Yeah, we're acting on feedback on this session in February. There's been quite a lot of feedback from the field with regards to bringing teachers together. So we are going to try it and see what happens, and use that hour to sit with practice, to then open up into discussion and conversation, to look at a specific topic together, and then close that session with a closing practice. But an opportunity to be together, to create community, to collaborate, and hopefully find new relationships, or at least re-spark relationships that maybe have people that you've not spoken to for some time. So we look forward to welcoming you to that event in February. But for now, let's just sit together for maybe 30 seconds and just bring this session to a close. Thank you very much. So just allowing just a few moments for maybe the session just to land with you. And just maybe noticing how you're feeling in terms of, as we come to the end of this session, and maybe any curiosities or thoughts that you might be having. but just allowing them to be there. Knowing that this community is here for you, to support you. And that at any time you feel the need to reach out, that we're happy to assist and help. Just bringing maybe a sense of gratitude for this moment and the causes and the conditions that allow us all to be here together. Taking this time in this virtual room with that sense of appreciation to Karen and for the time that you've given us today and everything that you've brought to us, those insights, the detail, the conversation, the questions. Just allowing that to land. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for sharing this space. And we look forward to seeing you all in February for those that can make it.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you all.